Hello there, my name's Vanessa Smedley and I'm a painter. Well, I am still in the festive spirit, so today we are going to paint this lovely reindeer right here. And I did one of those things where I took it from a daytime to a nighttime scene, and I also added a bunch of Christmas cheer. So I'm going to show you how I did that, and this time we're going to do a little bit of glazing. So prepare yourself for that. So let's do this. Here are this week's materials. You can pause and screenshot, or they're listed in the description for you. I am going to make painting the background much easier on myself with this rather complex subject, and I'm going to mask it all out with masking fluid. I always make sure to dip my brush into a mixture of liquid dish soap and water before I dip it into the masking fluid, or you will trash your brushes. Then let it dry for 30 minutes or more. We're going to make this nighttime, so we are going to start out with Ultramarine Blue, and then we are going to also mix up some Ultramarine Blue mixed with some Indigo Blue. If you watched my last episode, I used a lot of blue in order to make it into a nighttime scene. The little snowman guy. Well, I'm going to do the exact same thing here. So I've wet the entire background, making sure that I'm not getting it in the middle of the reindeer where I don't have any masking fluid. And I'm making it darker across the top half and then spraying it to make sure that it is melding together nicely, adding some indigo on the right side to make it darker there behind. And then I'm making a lighter little mix here at the bottom so that it looks like snow-covered ground. Right behind his little nose, we're going to make a nice dark tree line, and that is with Indigo Blue, and I'm just going to allow that to spread. And then I'm adding some just texture in the background to kind of make it look like snow or maybe a frozen lake. Then I use a spray bottle and let it spread. I have let all of that completely dry, of course, and now I'm using my rubber cement eraser to remove all of the masking fluid and get that all out of the way. Now, as you'll notice, I have added some lovely kind of harnessing here to make him look like one of Santa's reindeer. So I'm actually coming back in with more masking fluid and masking that off so that I can paint his fur around that and not have to worry about it. I started out masking out the bells alone, and then I was like, well, maybe I should just do the whole harness, and that'll just make it way easier. And in order to add the harness, I kind of just looked up several images of reindeer harnesses on the worldwide interwebs and just slapped them on there. And to be honest with you, they're kind of pretty much just probably fantasy. I mean, I don't think they're actually functional. So they look nice though. I mean, let's go with that. And I did kind of paint it on here in Photoshop just to try it out a little bit in this rather embarrassing mock-up right here. But hey, you know, it gets the point across and it helped me to visualize it. Then I just drew it in with a pencil. And if you don't have access to Photoshop, you can always just use a plain old number 2 pencil. As far as making this into a nighttime scene, I'm going to go about it a little bit differently than I did the snowman last week. I am actually going to come in with Ultramarine Blue and do a light wash of that all over the entire animal first. And then we're going to come in and paint in the browns and the grays on top of that, and we'll see how that works. Now I'm going to mix up the grays, so I'm going to start out with burnt umber and mix in quite a bit of Payne's gray, but I am going to leave it a little bit warmer. Then I'm going to add in some Ultramarine Blue to kind of blue this down. Then I'm doing the same 2 colors, but I'm going to mix more Payne's gray in it to make it more on the gray side, the cool side. Then I'm going to mix in some more of the Ultramarine Blue to bring it to the blue cast. I'm going to start by painting over the blue, the Ultramarine Blue, the light wash that I started out with over the whole thing, with the warmer of the 2 colors that I just mixed. And then along the edges here where it's light, I'm going to blend that with clean water so that it has a nice smooth blend. I'm going to come back in with a darker mixture of that in the darker areas, and then I'm going to do all of the antlers in succession, pretty much the exact same way. You just want to make sure that you're not going to lose all of those light colors. You kind of want to paint around those because, I mean, it would be a little bit more difficult to lift it out later. I mean, technically you probably could lift it out, but I think it's better to paint around it to start with. And then here I'm going to stir a little bit of controversy because I'm using a hairdryer to dry it out so that I don't have to wait in between each antler. Some people think that's a horrible idea, some people don't. I tend to do it when I'm in a hurry and don't want to have to wait. It's time for fun facts about reindeer, and if you're talking about the real animal, they live mostly in northern climates like the Arctic tundra, Russia, Alaska, that kind of place, also in Canada. But in North America, reindeer are called caribou. Those are the same animals. I had no idea. I've allowed the antlers to dry, and now I'm coming in with the cooler of my two colors that I mixed, and I'm going to begin to put in the detail on his face. And I'm going to paint around that kind of white area that is around the eyeballs, because that's kind of distinctive of these little reindeers. And then I'm going to paint around that on his face too. And obviously, like, it's actually blue. It's not necessarily white, but it looks white since everything around it is such a dark blue. That's how that all works, of course. And now I'm just bringing in a darker mixture of the same color to bring in some of the modeling of all the shadows and the fur and all of that kind of stuff on his face. Most of the rest of his body is really quite a bit lighter than his head, so I'm coming in quite a bit lighter here, and all of that nice blue is showing through nicely for now. As I paint this in, I'm making sure to kind of suggest some fur texture, and I'm not painting in every single hair, of course, because that would be excessive, but just making sure it has a nice lot of texture, that kind of, because they have like kind of, you know, long fur. Like, it's not super long, but it is longer than, like, you know, a white-tailed deer. And then, of course, using a thicker mixture to add in the darker fur areas and the shadow on the belly. Since the antlers have had quite a while to dry now, I'm going to come back in and darken up some of these areas and model it a little more clearly. Make sure they look round and all of that kind of stuff. Just coming in with a darker mixture of the same colors, nice and dark. It's time for another fun fact, and as the name would imply, they are a species of deer. But one interesting thing is that both the male and female of the species are able to grow antlers, and they are the only species of deer where that is a thing. In every other species of deer, only the males can grow the antlers. And then doing the same thing with the face, just adding in some of the darker shadows and some more definition of the fur and the eyeball. I did mention that both male and female reindeer can grow antlers, but what I didn't mention is that most likely Santa's sleigh is pulled by all females because the males all shed their antlers by December. Interesting there, Rudolph. For the eyeball, I'm adding in that super dark color, leaving a little bit in the middle, and then I'm lifting a little bit of it out with a very, very small brush with clean water on it. And that'll give it a nice blend. The rest of this is also dry now, so I'm going to come back in with some of the darker shadow areas and fur textures. After getting this far in the process and kind of taking a step back and looking at it, I'm realizing that the whole thing is much too light to look like it's in a nighttime setting. So I think what I'm going to do is allow this entire thing to dry very thoroughly, and then I'm going to mix up a very, very watery ultramarine blue mix and just glaze over the entire thing very carefully. So you want to just go right over it. You don't want to scrub back and forth because then you'll take some of the paint up with it. But as long as you just kind of glaze over the top of the entire thing lightly, it shouldn't move that paint too much, and that should afford this to look more, to give it more of a blue cast and make it look like it's more of a nighttime setting. While that's drying, I'm going to take some Alizarin Crimson, which has a nice cool cast to it anyway, and then I'm going to add some Carbazole Violet to it. And that should take it into the blue cast for us. All of that has dried nicely, and now I'm removing the masking fluid again. Then I'm going to begin to start painting in these lovely harness straps. I'm actually going to wet them first, and I'm making sure to paint around the studs and the bells on the larger part. And then I'm going to begin adding in the color. So you can see that I have definitely added a very, very blue tone to this. I mean, they're supposed to be red, and they do look red in all of this blue, but they're definitely quite a bit purple. So I'm adding some more of that Carbazole Violet down at the bottom underneath the chin and in the shadowy areas. Then I'm going to start on the larger harness here. And then of course we need to show the thickness of the leather here, so I'm making a shadow side right down the right side of it. Then of course we allow all of that to dry thoroughly. And then of course we come back in with a nice lovely light ultramarine blue wash. We're going to let that kind of dry a little bit, but then come back in with a darker wash at the bottom of each bell and or stud. And then a little bit of indigo at the bottom of each one as well. And while all of that is still wet, I take a very tiny number 0 brush and use a little bit of clean water on it and lift out the highlights on each bell. Then I use a little bit of indigo for the shadows on the sides of the harnesses and in between each strap. And then after that dries, I use a little bit of indigo to make the lines down the middle of the bells. Next, I'm squeezing out a little bit of white gouache right on top of some of this ultramarine blue, adding some water and mixing it in quite nicely. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of kind of more fur in this section right here because it was a little bit stiff from the masking fluid. That's going to afford it to be a little softer there. And then I'm going to take it and splatter some nice lovely snow everywhere. And of course my splatters got a little bit out of control, so I dabbed a bit of that up on it off of his face because it was just a little bit too distracting. And then I went back in and fixed a little bit of it on his face because it just seemed to be a little too much there. And here it is all dry and with the tape removed, and I do think it comes off as a night scene, so I believe all of that blue glazing did what it was supposed to do. And there you have it, a nice festive little reindeer, or caribou if you will. It's the same thing. Who knew? Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, all of that stuff, because that's how this channel gets to grow. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.